You're locked into the only podcast for Maine high school basketball. The biggest names, past and present. It's Big Time Hoops, the podcast, right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Big Time Hoops, the podcast. And we're talking big time. We're talking gold balls. We're talking legacies. We're talking all that stuff. And this man fits the bill right here. Nick Pelotte of Valley fame and later Plymouth State. Nick, what's going on tonight?
Not much, man. Not much at all. Just trying to settle into the nightly routine. I'm the general manager at Waterville Country Club, so just got home a little bit ago from closing down our restaurant, and just kind of looking forward to chatting with you in the midst of checking my fantasy football team and seeing how that's going. Trying to hang on for dear life, try to get a win here, move up those standings. But other than that, just another night living in Winslow, Maine with my wife and two dogs. It's pretty quiet here.
Yeah, I meant to ask before we came on, but you're not coaching this year, right? So most recently you were at Colby?
Yeah, so I spent 1 year, I think, in 2014 at Colby. Then went to Waterville High School for 4 years. And this would be my third year at Colby. And we just found out a couple days ago that sounds like the conference play is not going to happen. We're slated to start practice on Thursday in whatever capacity we can do that. There are some special restrictions as it relates to practice and how many times we can get together and how many people can be on the court and things of that nature. So, yeah, we're going to try to practice with the guys before they take off after first semester here. It's been a crazy year for everybody. But to be a college basketball athlete right now, I couldn't imagine, the decisions that have been put in front of them in terms of whether or not to return to school or take a year off and kind of rolling the dice. We have one senior with us that decided to come back to school, Wallace Tucker, and it looks like his senior year of college basketball is going to be anything but what he thought it might have been a couple of years ago. So, crazy times right now.
Yeah, and even for yourself, I mean, you talk about how just the coaching run that you've been on back at Colby now, but like you're heading into probably the most uncertain winter that you could probably remember in terms of like, am I going to be coaching? Am I not going to be coaching? Like, what's my winter look like right now?
It's interesting. I mean, I thought about ways that I can utilize my time. Obviously, being a basketball player, being a coach, I have not spent a lot of time on any ski mountains in the winter, but certainly has crossed my mind. And geez, it might not be a bad idea to try to take up and find a hobby. But like I said, I'm general manager at Waterville Country Club. It's been a long year at the club. Maybe this winter having some downtime and just getting in the gym and working out with the guys and not having the rigorous travel schedule. In the NESCAC, we play back-to-backs on Friday and Saturday, so the weekends are certainly taken up quite a bit. Once you start league play in January all the way to almost March, it's a pretty long road there. So yeah, it might be good for me to just get some downtime and recharge the batteries here for 2021. Hopefully things change and hopefully 2021 looks a little bit different.
So I was going to say, like, you feel for the kids, but at the same time, like, personally, you're probably like, hey, it might not be a bad winter to just do some different stuff, have some free time, like you said, recharge the batteries.
That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, one of the reasons why I'm still involved in basketball, and I'm so grateful to have a friend like Coach Damian Strayhorn, who's the head coach at Colby, gives me the opportunity to be a volunteer assistant over there. With them. I'm not over there for fun. I'm over there because I'm super competitive, and it's a scratch that I get to itch, and I get to itch it vicariously through our student athletes at Colby. So, in one regard, sure, would it be nice to have a winter to recharge the batteries and take a deep breath and not dive right in from my job at the country club into another full basketball season. But on the other end of that, what am I going to do with games not hanging in the balance and not being on the floor and trying to motivate the kids and trying to work them through timeouts and trying to see one small thing on the defensive end of floor that might help us get a stop late in the game. So, right now I say it could be a good thing to have a little slower winter, but I'm sure as the winter progresses, it certainly could get to the point where it drives me crazy not being on the bench and not being in basketball games with a scoreboard up there.
You might have to turn all that attention, all that focus to fantasy sports and just have the most intense, rigorous fantasy sports stretch of your life, just pouring it all into that.
That would be okay if I was better at drafting players that are actually play well on Sundays and Mondays, and I guess now Tuesdays with everything that's going on. So a couple years ago, I would tell you that fantasy was going great, but the last few years, certainly I have not. I would have been fired as a GM if I was in real life, certainly.
Yeah. If they had a fantasy draft for Maine high school basketball players, you might have been one of the ones picked at the top. You had an incredible career, which we're going to go back and kind of trace and see how we got to where we are now. So first thing I got to get cleared up here because I grew up in Fort Kent, Maine. So for me, everything south of Fort Kent was southern Maine. And when I watched the tournaments growing up, Western Maine felt like it was all southern Maine schools. I felt like it was all at the bottom tip. So whenever I kept seeing this Valley team pop up from Bingham, Maine, I always thought like Bingham was like tucked away like in southern Maine. But you guys are actually like Western Maine. So for those that aren't familiar with Bingham, such as myself, tell us about Bingham, growing up in Bingham, Maine.
Bingham, Maine is it's a small mill town in Western Maine. It's probably, I want to say, it's probably an hour and a half from the border, the Canadian border, if you go all the way up 201. Now, obviously, that's not going straight up the state towards North Kent. There's, this is kind of going at a diagonal towards Maine and how Maine's shaped. Obviously, you can get to Canada a little quicker than you can get to Fort Kent per se. But it's an old mill town that's right on the banks of the Kennebec River. We had, I think, 7 different towns going into our school district. The name of our high school was Upper Kennebec Valley Junior and Senior High School. I think the population of Bingham, which would have been the largest town of the 7, was about 1,200 people. I think it's less than that now as things have changed with the logging industry and stuff like that. But I want to say it was your typical small Maine town, but to be honest with you, I haven't spent a ton of time in too many other towns. But our youth and our childhood was something that was very safe and very comfortable. We could leave our house after school at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and we could be out riding our bikes around town until well after dark, and our parents could feel comfortable that nothing drastic was going to happen to us. Everybody knew each other. In a world before cell phones, and certainly before cell phones in Bingham, Maine, no matter what we were doing, our parents could probably find out about that pretty easily by chatting with some neighbors and things like that. So it was I guess in my opinion, it was a great place to grow up. Very thankful to grow up there. The people there were great. My father was an educator in Bingham. So because of that, we were entrenched socially with most of the town. Like I said, most everybody knew everybody, but there wasn't a ton to do. And because of that, we found ourselves, playing a lot of sports. And one of the sports that became near and dear to our heart was basketball. And I think a lot of that had to do with, some of the basketball history in Bingham and at Valley High School, prior to all of us, getting there, when we had the big run of state championships. So, yeah, it was a great place to grow up. I miss it. I haven't been able to get back there too often. I know, my wife is from Michigan. Met her in around 2010, well after my basketball career was over, both, high school and collegiately. And, we just got in the car one day, a couple springs ago, and I just said, hey, let's drive up to Bingham. I'm going to show you where I grew up. And it was quite interesting to see what it looks like now, but it was also, it was great to get back there. It was the first time I've been back there in a while because my parents had moved out. We were able to hopefully this doesn't get me in trouble, but we drove right up to the high school, and the doors weren't locked, and we walked right in. I showed her the trophy case, and I walked down to my old locker, and we checked things out, and it was and that's so typical of Bingham, because that's just the way things are, and there's no reason for the doors to be locked. Nothing real drastic or bad is going to happen up there, and that's why it was such a great place to be.
Absolutely. So when it comes to basketball in Maine, people will say, oh, the best basketball is in the big cities. It's in Portland. It's the Bangor programs. It's the stuff like that. But for the rest of us, small town basketball, like that's Maine basketball. That's Maine basketball at its best. And I'm guessing that's what it was for you. I'm guessing Friday nights growing up, it was Valley High, just watching small Class D basketball growing up on that, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, my father was a high school basketball coach. When we moved up to Bingham in 1989, my father was coaching. He was coaching soccer, basketball, softball. The athletic director at the high school. My whole youth was based around his coaching and going to his games and being at his practices. My upbringing was a little different than I'm sure most. I mean, a lot of people would get on a bus and go home and do their homework. I was getting on a bus to go to whatever field or gym my father was at to participate in his practices, whether or not he was coaching girls soccer, girls softball, boys soccer, girls basketball. I was a participant. I wasn't sitting there on the sidelines. I know that when he was coaching the girls basketball at Bingham, there was times where they had roster issues, and they had getting a number of players to be on the team was a problem. They'd have 7, 8 players. It's tough to have practice with that amount of players. So, me, Jason, and Luke, we'd get on the bus from whether or not we were at Quimby or Moscow elementary schools, and we'd get on the bus and go up to the high school. We'd get right off the bus and go right in and practice with the girls. So, I mean, that's what my experience was in terms of high school basketball. Obviously, we weren't in a city. We did not have probably the same opportunities, whether it was – I was never somebody that participated in AAU. I know Jason and Luke got involved in AAU, but their father was driving them, 2 hours one way to practice, twice or 3 times a week. Supremely dedicated to their craft and their hobby, and which was great for them, but that was never something that I got involved in. So whether it was youth basketball or junior high, or we evolved up into high school basketball, we were really, it was small town basketball, and it was the only thing that we knew. We didn't have, myself personally, outside of what we did with a summer program or the scrimmages we scheduled throughout the season, there wasn't a ton of basketball for me that was played outside that bubble. Probably the biggest opportunity for me to play basketball outside of small town Bingham was year after year heading back to Pine Tree Basketball Camp, which was run by Dick Whitmore and Dick Meter.
Great camp.
College. So, I mean, it was small town basketball is near and dear to my heart. I think that's what makes Maine great. That's what makes Maine passionate about high school basketball. If you go to the tournaments in February or some of the state games that are played in March, it's unbelievable. You look up into the crowds, and I know for a fact, because I've lived in one of those towns, there's not anybody left in the towns. And, the business owners lock the doors and shut the lights off, and they say, we'll be back when the game is over. And, that's pretty unique. So.
That small town basketball thing is special, right? It's a family, it's a community thing. And I think when you're younger, you kind of just gravitate to the players that came before you and be like, all right, I want to be like this kid when I get to that point. I want to be just like this guy. Who was it for you? Who were the guys that came before you that kind of sparked that desire to be great when you got to high school?
So we moved to Bingham late, I think 89, 90, something like that. In the early 90s, Valley High School had a couple really good basketball players. I would say the first one that comes out to mind for me is Aaron Sherman. A lot of us younger people, we loved Aaron. Aaron, he had a local job in town where he was in charge of mowing the soccer fields outside of the Quimby courts. And whenever we would see him on the lawnmower, us young kids would do anything we could to try to coerce him over towards the hoop so he could dunk a basketball for us. So certainly Aaron Sherman was at the top of the list at the time. He was the best basketball player. I think Valley had seen, no disrespect to anybody that kind of had come before him. There was also two other gentlemen that played with him, Jimmy and Joey Bigelow. They were twins. They kind of they were big. They were 6'6", 6'7". They could move. They were very good at basketball. And then they always had some role players to go along with them. And they made it to a state championship game versus Washburn at Augusta Civic Center and came up short. And shortly after that, probably outside of Aaron, the guy that I became very, very interested in and I admired him a lot was Aaron's younger brother, Lance Sherman. Lance actually dated one of my father's players. So Lance, and as a byproduct, was kind of around the family from time to time. My brother also played on a team with Lance. They were undefeated in the regular season before coming up short in a conference in a regional final. So Lance Sherman certainly comes to mind. He went on to play, I think, a season or two at UMF. And then Coach Littlefield's son, Dustin Littlefield, I think he's the all-time leading scorer. Was, when I graduated, he was all-time leading scorer at Valley, I think. And, he was another great player. He also played on my brother's team. So, those were guys that, like you said, Tuesday nights and Friday nights were dedicated to going to the gym. The girls' game was first, and the boys' game was after that. And as a young kid, I just remember sitting on the corner of the bleachers and watching them run through the tunnel of the cheerleaders and break the break through the paper that was taped up to a gigantic hula hoop or whatever the heck that was. But that was our life, and those were the guys that we idolized. And it got to the point when we got to high school and we started to have some success. It was nice to see, my brother was still around, Lance was still around, getting those guys kind of acknowledgement about how good we were was, it was pretty serious for us, because when we were younger, there was a time where we never really thought that we could get to their level. So those are certainly some guys that stuck out to me.
You guys definitely did get to their level. Maybe went a little bit beyond what they accomplished. And you had a great cast of guys on your team. You mentioned a couple of them, the Hartwell twins. Another one, Big Brian Andre. When was the first time you met Brian? Did he grow up in the same town as you, or did you not really cross paths until you got to middle school and high school?
So Brian's family, they purchased a motel in Bingham. And I want to say that purchase happened in, I want to say probably maybe the spring of his 8th grade year. So I would have been a freshman, and he might have been in 8th grade. And it may have been the year after. It may have been when I was a sophomore and he was a freshman. But I think he came from the Leeds, Turner, Green area. And when Brian came to town, he was more interested in baseball than anything. He was obviously, a good sized kid, big stature. And, I remember when he came to town, he was very interested in trying out for the baseball team. He wanted to pitch. As you can imagine, a big guy like him standing on the mound, he could fire it in there. And then, I don't think he was super interested in basketball. But such is life in Bingham, Maine. Basketball is much more important than baseball, and inevitably he became attracted to the sport. And he put in a ton of time, and he spent a lot of time with Jason and Luke at the Quimby courts. And over the course of one summer, it was the summer before his sophomore year, he went from a guy who really had never played basketball before to somebody who was contributing for us at the varsity level. And had we not been, as good as we were, he would have been contributing a little bit more. But he's a nice little success story. He started so late and ended up going on to MCI and then getting a scholarship to go to Buffalo. I mean, that's as big as it's ever happened. for Bingham. And so, he was obviously, it's nice to have those sort of credentials and that sort of story for such a small town. And kudos to Brian for being able to kind of carry the torch for the rest of us.
Absolutely. So before we get to the high school days, I just got to ask you one question here about before high school, because we're going to get into what your record was in high school, which is, it's impressive. But I'm wondering, did you lose any games in middle school? Have you ever lost a game? Like, was there ever a time where you actually lost a basketball game?
Yeah, interesting question. I think that on the surface, it's easy for people to assume that we haven't lost many games, but the reality is we lost games all the time, and it didn't, regardless of it, if it was a pickup game on Quimby courts or if it was a non-counting scrimmage at Christmas time or what have you. We were tested and we were beat, and I think that's an important piece of all of our, that's an important piece of the story, because had we not been beat in some of those occasions, maybe we wouldn't have been able to recall what it felt like to be on the losing end. And what ended up manifesting itself through that entire run was just how such a deep hatred we developed for losing.
Right.
We didn't go through it much, but when it did happen, it was something that affected us for long stretches of time. And to be honest with you, there were many times when there was only 4 of us playing basketball on the courts and on the playground, and you split it up and you play 2-on-2, and I took a Hartwell twin and the other Hartwell twin went with somebody else, and you didn't win every game, and
right.
You didn't leave that court friends sometimes, you didn't leave that court on good terms sometimes, and you had to find a way to rebuild that relationship sometime later. But I think what evolved from that is eventually when we all got on the court together, something special happened. So people do ask us, do you even know what it's like to lose? Have you, we've lost, we've dealt with failure, and I'm glad that we dealt with failure, because I think that helped us along the way, because there was, certainly wasn't every night, but there were some nights in the Class D level, specifically as we get later in the tournaments and state championship games, where we were tested, and people gave us, their best shot, and they didn't have anything to lose, and we were the ones that had a ton to lose, because we had, a Maine high school basketball schoolboy streak on the line. But so prior to high school, to answer your question, there wasn't a lot of losing there either. I think we had a 42-game winning streak in the elementary level, and that was snapped when we lost twice in the same day to Skowhegan High School. They were, they brought up a pretty good elementary basketball team led by Sean Walker and a host of others, and we invited them to Bingham for this little tournament that was organized by my father and some other people in town, and we invited them there because we wanted to see how we stacked up. And we found out that we were not at their level. And I think after that day, we went back to work and tried to figure out how we were going to get to their level. So in junior high, we ended up winning, I think, 22. The teams that I was on, we won 22 straight before high school, and then and then in high school, I was able to be part of some pretty good basketball teams that was able to rattle off 84 straight countable victories. So
yeah,
good run.
Absolutely. When you got to high school, I'm curious, as a freshman, what was listed on the roster for your height, and how tall were you really as a freshman? I'm guessing you were a scrawny little freshman coming in.
I don't know what I was listed at, but I'm going to guess that I was 4'11". 4'11". I know for a fact that my sophomore year, so a year later, I was 5'2", 102 pounds. So I must have been 90 pounds as a freshman, something like that would be my guess. Because I did grow, I grew, 3, 4, 5 inches or whatever it was. So yeah, I was small. I can, I have a couple really cool images from after some state games, and this was not like staged or anything, but I got a picture of the gold ball as a freshman after a state game, and I had the gold ball kind of to my right, and I was kissing the gold ball. And then as a senior, we tried to, I think the attempt was to try to replicate the picture. It was taken by the same photographer. And I actually was holding the gold ball on the left. So if you put the pictures side by side, they almost look like they could be reflections of one another, but you have one very physically immature child who looks probably 8 years old, and then you have somebody who's 17 years old that's grown up a little bit. So it's my freshman year it was tough. I'm young for my grade. My birthday's in October. So I was, I think my parents sent me off to school when I was 4, going to turn 5. So I think I was a little ahead of the, a little ahead of schedule. So that's probably one of the reasons why that I was not so physically imposing as a freshman. But I didn't turn out to be a big guy anyways. So.
Yeah, and so you were a year ahead of Brian in the Hartwells, but you didn't waste any time your freshman year. You guys won a gold ball your freshman year. So who were the guys in front of you when you were a freshman?
So when I was a freshman, the senior group was Dustin Cool, Jed and Aubrey Belanger, Ian Belanger. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody else of that group. No, Gavin would have started with those guys. Ian would have came off so I think that covers that whole senior class there. The juniors would have been Gavin Robinson, Wade Morrill, Lucas Cates, and Terry Nichols, I'm sorry. And then we had a great sophomore. Chris Willer was probably one of the greatest athletes in Valley history. He was a freshman. He was a freshman on varsity the year before and played quite a bit. Had a wonderful year as a sophomore, was one of our leading scorer, along with Dustin Cool. And, then it was me. I was the only freshman on the team, and we rounded out with some other guys as well. But those were the top guys that were contributing night in and night out. And it was an interesting team. I don't think the expectations were that for that team. They were certainly not championship or bust like some of the other teams eventually were. I think Valley in the past had at least equally talented teams and maybe more talented teams, when you want to stack up player per player. But I'll tell you right now, that team bought in. They bought into one another. They played together. They played hard. They played defense, and it was a very apropos start to the streak, because that team went about their business in the most correct way they could possibly have done. Unselfish, hardworking, show up to work, lunch pail, hard hat type of team. And we played fast, but we played some defense as well, contrary to maybe some of our scores. We played together and we had a lot of fun. And we had Chris in transition. We had Gavin making threes. We had Aubrey and Wade getting rebounds, and Ian on the block, and Dustin Cool playing in transition. You just had a little bit of everything. And when you all put it together and you played as hard as we played, we were able to rattle off 21 straight wins and kind of, I think, shock Class D and shock, some of our rivals and some of our other opponents who in the past would have just said, Valley's a team that they're always pretty good, but they're gonna find a way to kind of fold up the tents at some point in the tournament.
You mentioned how growing up you went and watched these games and you saw these schools come to Valley and kind of just take it in as a spectator. That freshman year was your first chance to actually go around and play in these schools, in these gyms. And I always get a kick out of asking this question, like, what were some of the environments that you went into for the first time? Kind of like, oh, wow. Like, what were some of the hostile places on the Valley schedule? Because I gotta be honest, I'm not too familiar with the Western Maine Class D lineup. So if you could, please. And
that's certainly fair. We played in some interesting gyms, interesting towns. It's Class D basketball after all. Some of our rivals, I think at the time, Monmouth Academy and Richmond High School had come down to D from C, so they were always pretty good. I know the Richmond girls team had given my father's Valley girls team some fits at times, so I think they were certainly the bar at the time. We always ran into, prior to me getting to high school, my brother's teams and even some teams before that ran into the Hyde School out of Bath. which was always an interesting situation because they had a post-grad team there as well, but then they had a varsity team. So, there was, I'm not going to call it recruiting. There's no sour grapes. I mean, they did what they did, but we're talking about kids from Bingham, Maine. I know that the team, that my brother's team, they were undefeated in the regular season. I think they were the number 1 seed, and they ended up losing to Hyde in the regional final. And there was kids from New York City. There was kids from Texas. There was kids from all kinds of places that weren't, certainly weren't Bingham, Maine. Yeah. But some of the interesting environments, I would say, Monmouth and Richmond were always a little bit crazy. But I don't think anything stacked up to, what would happen if Valley and Forest Hills got together. Neither gym is big. Neither gym seats a whole lot. So it certainly was an entire town affair when those games happened, and they were, both schools were well above average in terms of their ability to perform. And, whether it was on the girls' side or the boys' side, there was always great basketball games to be played, and they were played in small gyms, and they were played in the middle of winter, and people were driving their snowmobiles to get to the games. And it was certainly quite a scene.
So you mentioned that your freshman year team kind of exceeded expectations. Maybe people weren't expecting you guys to go undefeated and win a state championship. How was it different your sophomore year? I'm guessing you as the competitor was, I'm going to keep this going. I want to keep winning. And I'm guessing there was a bigger target that time as being the defending state champ. So what was the mindset? How was the mindset different from freshman year to sophomore year for you individually?
So, in terms of individually, I think my own personal goals were to, find a way to contribute more than I had as a freshman. Yeah. I think early on I was somebody who, again, was physically immature, probably going to struggle to be on a high school basketball court for the most part. But I did find my way to, I found my way in spots to be pretty effective, whether or not was my instincts, being able to, to read some plays or find a way to get a steal on the defensive end or step in and take a charge. But I was also, pretty small and pretty quick, and I could get into places that not many people could get into. So I don't know what my expectations as a freshman were. My goal was to be on the team and to make varsity, because that was not something that was a custom for everybody. So as you fast forward into the next year, it was important for me to, to not only to contribute in some aspect, but to be a major contributor. So, whether it was working on my shot or trying to find ways to figure out how to defend bigger guys and things like that. So I just wanted to expand my role and ended up doing that, ended up starting every game for our team the next year. But in terms of a team mindset, I think for us, now the bar had been set, and had been set by, the previous year's team that, okay, if they can go 21-0 and win a state championship, we need to do right by everybody in the community, our teachers, our peers, our coaches, and everything else. We owe it to them to try to make another run at this. I think we felt pretty good about it based on, looking at the landscape of Class D. We felt as though that there was an opportunity based on who was graduating, and we thought that there was an opportunity for us to go and get that done. But there were some hurdles along the way. I think, North Yarmouth Academy didn't graduate anybody, and that's the team that we played in the regional final. Obviously, Hyde was always lurking for us, and we ended up running into Jonesport Beals again for the second time, which, with Oriali there running the show, always dangerous. So we felt like we could get it done. That was our expectation, and I think that year was, even though we probably felt like we were the favorites because we hadn't lost in some time, I'm not sure, looking at the complexion of everybody else's roster, that necessarily was the case. I think North Yarmouth Academy, they had every reason to be able to beat us and overcome what we had. They had a high level scorer in Tyler Smith. They had a big guy in the middle. They had a point guard that was pretty good, and some young guys that could make shots, and Connor Welch and Parker. So it was interesting how that game unfolded in the regional final, where we blitzed them in the first couple minutes of the game, and they just weren't able to recover. But I'm sure that they walked into that game. They had lost one game during the year, and that was to Falmouth, a Class C team that went on to either win the state championship or lose in the finals. And they subsequently beat Falmouth at a different point. That's why we were the 2 seed and they were the 1 seed, because they got so many heels points from that Falmouth win. But year 2 was we had high expectations, and we were able to live up to them. And we lost 4 seniors, but we moved Jason and Luke into the fold to replace the Belanger twins. My role expanded. Wade Morrow was his first year on varsity, and he was or his second year on varsity, but was a senior and was really coming into his own. And Gavin was a lights out shooter for us. And our leader and our captain, Chris Willer, was a guy who he wasn't going to let us lose too many nights. We just kind of had to fill in the spots for him.
The state game, where'd you guys play your sophomore year? Did you guys play in Bangor, Augusta?
Yeah, we were at Bangor. That was one of the
first time in the auditorium, right?
Yeah, that was one of the great things about Class D, was that Thursday night state championship game at the Bangor Auditorium. And being a Western Maine squad, those were our only 2 chances to play in the auditorium. So it was great. It was interesting. It was different. At the time, the court was not that good. It was. They had the holes in the, essentially in the court. They were like little depressions on where the actual boards were either screwed in, or I don't know how. I have no idea what they were, but it was pretty difficult to play basketball when, half the court piece is flat, but there's four little circular depressions in the court as you went on, and it was slippery. It wasn't the best of conditions, but that really didn't matter when you got to go there on a Thursday night and play in front of. I don't know how much we packed the gym my sophomore year, but we played Jonesport Beals. They travel well. We traveled well. I got to think we put thousands of people in there, but I know my senior year, when we got a chance to go back, there was 5,000 people in that place, and there wasn't really an open seat. That was in the middle of a snowstorm where there was about 2 feet of snow. It must have taken us 3 or 4 hours to get back to Bingham. And, that was all right for us because we were able to, go back with some hardware. So.
Absolutely. So you mentioned how, your goals kind of changed, or the impact you wanted to make as a freshman was just to make varsity. Sophomore year was just to contribute a little bit more. When did things start to click for you? When did it become kind of your team? When did you start running the show? I'm guessing it was junior year. That's when things kind of clicked for you, right? A little bit bigger, a little bit more physically developed, had that experience.
So
junior year off and running.
I think things certainly clicked for me a little bit in terms of now I went from contributing a small amount to contributing, quite a bit, as a starter and somebody who's getting a lot of minutes. And then my junior year, certainly I was, probably we still had our unquestioned leader, Chris Willer. He was our captain. He was, 4-year varsity player. We're going to follow him, wherever he goes. But, took on a bigger role. I think, as my body matured a little bit, I got involved in lifting weights with Jack Kaplan in his weightlifting program. So I went from, kind of very skinny and frail to having a little bit of muscle and some tone and definition to my body, which certainly helped. It helped me be much more efficient on the court. It helped me defend. I know that that was the year when not only was I contributing and making some shots from the outside and still getting involved in transition, but I played a pretty big role defensively. Now, Coach Littlefield was always trying to figure out, okay, who can Nick guard at 5'2" that's, not going to kill us, to now, Nick at 5'8", I can put Nick on somebody who, he can either shut down a scorer, or I can, provide supplemental help to. I remember when we were going to play the state game versus Katahdin, and Brandon McCarthy, very good player for Katahdin. He was a junior at the time. great guard. He had a heck of a tournament up to that point. And I was getting ready I'm guarding this man. Like, I'm going to guard him, and we're going to see what happens. And coach didn't give me the assignment. Coach actually, obviously, when you look back on it now, is a lot. It looks to be a little bit more brilliant than I thought at the time. Coach put a gentleman on our team, Phil Nichols, on Brendan McCarthy, and I think Phil had gotten some quality defensive assignments thus far in the season, but that was an assignment that I wanted, and I wanted that task, and felt like, I had been a 2-year starter, and it was something that I should take on. But coach, he told me, go over here and guard this guy. He's not going to shoot that much, and he's not going to do a whole lot, but here's what I want you to do. When Brendan McCarthy gets to his second dribble, I want you to run at him, and I want you to go cause as much havoc as you can. And if you look back at the tape, whether it was me causing jump balls or getting direct steals, I think I was involved in probably 9 to 10 Katahdin turnovers because of my ability just to run at Brendan and surprise him and make him pick up his dribble and get caught and do some different things. So as we progressed into my junior year, not only, like I said, I'm taking baby steps to try to be a contributor. And my sophomore year, I got to the point where I was contributing on offense, and I was able to run and make some things happen in transition, but they still had to hide me defensively. And then as a junior, there was no more hiding me defensively. I was able to, with my basketball instincts and the maturity of my body and getting into the weight room, I was actually able to become an asset on that side of the floor, rather than a liability.
When did the crowd start getting nasty? You mentioned somewhere like the schools you guys played, and I'm guessing as you guys kept winning state championships, the rivalry games became a little bit more intense than usual. Maybe the crowds were a little bit more hostile than usual. When did it start getting hostile? I'm guessing you guys played in front of some hostile crowds.
Yeah, it probably got hostile as the streak became a little more progressed. Probably after year 2, people developed some sort of resentment and hatred to, people say everybody loves a winner. Well, everybody hates a winner too. So there's, it's like you draw the line in the sand, and half the people get over here and half the people get over there. So myself personally, being very small and being kind of, I've said before, it's almost like a novelty circus act. When I was a freshman playing on varsity, nobody had any hatred or anything bad to say about me. They were more or less amazed that I was actually out on the basketball court. And maybe that trickled into my sophomore year because I still, was not that big of a guy. But, certainly as we progressed into my junior year, and, Chris Willer was, full steam ahead, leading the way. Jason and Luke had a year of varsity basketball under their belt. I was maturing, able to do more, throw Brian Andre into the fold, 6'10", coming off the bench for us, providing us with something that we had never had in terms of a rim protector and things of that nature. I would say that's probably when people showed up to see us win, but I also think people showed up just in case we were losing too, because they wanted to be there and, and say we told you so, or laugh at us or whatever they thought was going to happen.
How about those? How about the tournament environments? Talk to me about Augusta, because I never got a chance to play in Augusta. I played in Bangor, but you guys made yourselves right at home in Augusta, right? Because
we did.
4 years in a row. So what's the Augusta environment like? What do you take away from Augusta?
I take a lot away from Augusta. I mean, like I said, my father was a coach, and all his teams, for the most part, went to Augusta. My brother was a player before me, so we spent many of February vacations down there at the Augusta Civic Center. It was a routine for us. The boys played on Saturday to start vacation. The girls played on Monday or Tuesday. The boys played again on Wednesday. The girls played again on Thursday. And then both teams played the next Saturday if they were lucky enough to get all the way to the regional crown. So there weren't many off days in terms of, what else you were going to do during February vacation if the teams were being successful. So I remember I was there as a fan and as supporting my family members very young. The one thing I'll always take away from Augusta is to me, it has this distinct smell. Like when you walk into Augusta, it's not a good smell. It's not a bad smell. It's just, I know where I'm at, and this is the smell of Augusta Civic Center. And it was always a treat for us, for me, certainly as a young person. And then, it was a transformation, as a fan and as somebody you're supporting your father or your brother, or you're going there to support your peers or whatever that is. It's one thing to be a fan, and it's fun. There's not a ton of pressure, although I do remember making some long drives home with my mother in complete tears because we had lost, and what else, what are we going to do? It was life and death for us. But as you progress as a player, to get the opportunity to play on that big stage, you're not playing in Class D gyms anymore. You're playing in the Augusta Civic Center, which is, that's a place where maybe professional teams play, or college teams, or the Globetrotters, or whatever it is. It's certainly a different feeling than Maine high school basketball. And, to be able to step on that court, for the first time, it was, you look up into the crowd and there's not a couple sets of bleachers. There's rows and rows and rows of seats, and go all the way up to, the balcony area. So I have fond memories of Augusta. Probably people will say, that's because, of the success you had there. But I think it's a great place. I understand why people enjoyed the old Bangor Auditorium, better. I felt like the atmosphere, because when I was going to Class A games as a fan and seeing the student sections, like I feel like the acoustics in Bangor were great. They were different than Augusta, but I would stack Augusta right up there as well. I remember being a kid going down there on a Thursday night to watch a Class C semifinal game. I believe TJ Cowett was playing for Winthrop, and they were playing the nightcap, and I don't know if Falmouth was in there as well, but there was not a seat in the house. And Coach Lapis, who was the coach at Villanova at the time, recruiting TJ, he was in the building. I ran down and got his autograph. I mean, it was just Augusta Civic Center can get bumping and can get loud, and certainly some fond memories. And I would prefer to be down in Augusta over Bangor.
Okay. So the third championship, this is probably up to this point, this is the one where you have the most responsibility, right? The biggest role, the most involved. Was there a moment during that third run to a championship that kind of sticks out? Like, was there a close game or defining moment that kind of pushed you guys along to a third championship, or did you guys pretty much just smooth sailing all the way through to that third one?
It was not smooth sailing. We in the regional in regional final, we ran into a Hyde team. And they had a gentleman, Cheris Moore, who went on to play Division I basketball at Manhattan. He was a big individual. He protected the rim. He was a difficult guard for us. And, Chris Willer and the performance of his life carried us through the second half of that game. And, again, like probably had happened in the past, he wasn't going to let us lose. So we were able to win that game a little more comfortably than we kind of anticipated. We were down at halftime, and I remember Jason Hartwell, I believe, got blocked by Cheris Moore, at the buzzer at halftime, kind of out of nowhere. Great defensive play, and we went into half down 1 point or whatever. And I remember Jason coming into the locker room, and you could see there was some uncertainty, and he was kind of questioning whether or not he could contribute and get out there and make it happen. And Chris circled the wagons for us like he did so many times. And he would talk about this run. We haven't made a run yet. We're always going to make a run. There's always going to be a point in the game where we blitz somebody for 2 or 3 minutes. And when that comes, we're going to be okay. So just kind of, stay the course until that happens. And to be honest with you, that night it might have been a one-man blitz of Chris Willer. But he propelled us to a pretty significant victory. And, then the tall task became, Brendan McCarthy's team in Katahdin. They were dropping down from C to D, which seemed to happen to us a few times along the way. But we were ready to go. and they had some other great players, the Robertson twins. I don't believe they were twins, but they were brothers. They were very physical individuals and matched up well with Jason and Luke. So that was an interesting game. Coach McAvoy came out in a triangle and two, little Maine high school basketball junk defense, Chris Willer, kind of leaving the other guys to kind of float around. And unfortunately for Chris, as well as he played versus Hyde in the regional final, he fell into a very good defensive game plan in the Katahdin game and didn't play his best. And there were times in that game that we were losing in the second half, and we hadn't been losing in the second half in years. And to think that, we had won 62 straight at that point, and we are a minute to go in the third quarter down 4 or 5 points, that's a time when panic can set in. And, we had as big expectations for ourselves than anybody had for us. And it wasn't the people in the crowd that we were worried about. It wasn't, the mothers and the fathers and our peers and our teachers. And, we wanted to play hard for them because we wanted to represent, Bingham and the neighboring towns appropriately. But the real issue for us is going back into that locker room and looking at each other, knowing how much we cared about what was happening and having to reconcile that we came up short. So, that game was interesting, and we were on the ropes for a very long time. And I know myself, I was able to score a couple points in that game. Like I said, I caused some havoc defensively and was able to get some cheap buckets in transition, but did not shoot the basketball very well. Our team did not shoot the basketball very well. Again, we were kind of stymied by this triangle and two. And some of these junk defenses, there's not a whole lot you can do when those individuals are guys who handle the basketball and initiate offense. And, so they put some guys on our team in situations that they hadn't been in. But we were able to kind of persevere and to gut one out and to make a couple plays defensively and take advantage of some benefits. Katahdin turned the ball over a couple times late. They fouled me in a tie game situation when they thought they were losing. And, so all of these things, in one regard, it's like, we were fortunate. We were on the right side of luck, but we're also, we may have made our own luck, and we were certainly there to close the door when we were given that opportunity. But that was touch and go for a long time. And, we've all watched the tape a few times, me and my teammates. And, there's a point there in the third quarter where things are certainly dicey, and I could see the energy kind of overwhelming me and I took like 2 giant deep breaths, like, okay, like come back into the moment. Basketball here, you're down a couple points, like just figure it out. So that was certainly something that sticks out from that season, and fortunate and lucky enough to pull that one out because they had a great game plan, great coach, and they had great players, and they certainly stymied us for a long time.
Absolutely. So up to that point, 3 straight state championships, no losses, but I'm guessing senior year, would you say most talented team?
I think so. I try not to, I try not to compare. I try not to each of those teams are different. And I try not to, I don't want to disrespect any of those other teams. I love all those guys. I think that, all those teams were great in their own right. But I do think, with the evolution of Brian, not only was now he 6'10" still, but he had trimmed down a little bit, and he had, gotten in the weight room and gotten strong and worked on his agility and, his skills, with the basketball were increasing. I mean, that was just it was a huge difference maker. You throw into the mix the evolution of Jason and Luke Hartwell as well. Now they're at the 3rd year at varsity. So, yeah, I think a lot of people would share that or sentiment that was the most talented team. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with them. We certainly were we were able to showcase that a little bit more based on some of the opponents that we scheduled outside of our season. So
that's what I wanted to ask. That's one of my questions I had to ask here.
Yeah. So I think that would certainly be evidence and affirmation that sentiment is probably true. But let me just be very clear. I loved all my teammates. I loved all the teams that I played on, and I think they're all very, very good basketball teams.
All right. So this is one of the questions I had to ask, because this is what I've heard, but I don't know if I read it somewhere, if it's just word of mouth, but everyone always says the best basketball is Class A basketball, the best schools, best players, all this, that. People always sleep on Class D, but I heard that, I think it was your senior year, you guys played in a tournament, and either Portland was there or Bangor was there, and that you guys just ran them out of the gym and won by like 30 points or something like that. Can we confirm this? What's the deal behind this story?
So I can confirm that the 2000-2001 Valley basketball team, we got invited to the Capital City Classic down in Augusta, and we found ourselves in the championship game versus Bangor the last night of the tournament. What most people probably don't remember, but everybody on my team remembers, is that a few hours earlier we had lost to Winthrop. But because of the damage that we had done to people in the first couple of days, that we had still qualified out of our pod or our pool to be able to represent that group of teams in the championship game versus Bangor. So again, it goes back to your question earlier. Have you ever lost? We lost that night, and that Valley team was very good, and we shouldn't have lost to that Winthrop team. But we did, because we were doing things that we shouldn't have been doing, and we did not play very well. And as we were trying to get prepared for obviously a very good Bangor team led by Joe Campbell and
state champs that year, right? Class A state champs.
My guy Z Ray running the point for them. I love Zach Ray. That was they were unfortunately on the receiving end of a lot of pent up frustration and aggression from what had just happened to us versus Winthrop. And I know people talk about that Bangor game and say, well, Coach Reed, they had a regular season game, within 48 hours or the next night, whatever it was. And, they weren't playing the game to win. And he played everybody. I have the video. I have the tape. Joe Campbell didn't come out of the game from the moment it started until like 3 minutes to go in the game. And I believe the game we were up 21-4 after the first quarter, and we never looked back. And we beat them by 28, I think, which at the time for us, we were, jacked up about. It was vindication. Yes, we lost to Winthrop, but this is what we did to Bangor. And that really didn't hit home until what happened, up in Bangor a few months later, when Zach and Joe linked up for the most famous, probably one of the most famous buzzer beaters up there at the Bangor Auditorium.
Absolutely.
Memory beating my guy Cantor Medley and Katarina and the Deering squad that really was supposed to be unstoppable, but Bangor packed the house that night, and they had the crowd going, and those guys showed up and played pretty hard to get it done. So that became important for us because, yes, we had won Class D. Yes, we had won 84 in a row, but that was the Class A champion, and we beat them handily, and we beat them without really any doubt. So that was probably cementing the fact that how good that Valley team was, because that Valley team 4 years in, we were getting all the press and all the, the recognition and the accolades from all the work that the previous year's teams had done. We were on the verge of winning 84 games in a row, but 63 of them had happened in a different season. So, we were reaping the benefits from all the hard work of those other our other teammates. And, the media was following us around pretty significantly that year. We had an article in Sports Illustrated. We were on the news every other night, and, there was a lot going on for us, and which is probably another reason why that team is kind of so highly regarded, because they were put in people's face, from a media perspective.
Yes, you mentioned all the coverage you guys had. What sticks out the most from that senior year? I'm guessing I'm guessing you felt pressure. I'm guessing you getting that close to the finish line, having never lost a game, never lost a state championship. I'm guessing there was pressure that you put on yourself to finish it out the right way, right?
I mean, there would have to be. I would have to, I'm sure that I wouldn't be speaking completely, accurately if I said there wasn't. But what I could say about that is that we had worked so hard up to that point that we were putting ourselves in a situation where it was going to be very difficult to play, poorly enough to kind of screw that up. And that was, I don't want to say that arrogantly, I just want to say that from the terms of we had worked really hard to get to the level that we had got to. I can speak confidently in saying there is nobody in the history of Maine high school basketball that spent more time on a playground than Jason and Luke Hartwell. It would be impossible. They were at the playground working on their game from the moment the sun came up to the moment the sun went down. And the only reason that was the case is because we didn't have lights. So, that team in particular, we worked really hard. And, the byproduct of that is we knew that because of our hard work is we put ourselves in a situation where there wasn't going to be many bumps in the road. And what we needed to do was just to make sure that from, a mental aspect and an emotional aspect, we stayed kind of hungry and focused and committed to finishing the deal. And that's why I'll always say this about Coach Littlefield, our high school coach. He was the perfect coach for us because he wasn't this crazy motivator, loud speeches, breaking clipboards or anything like that. We didn't need that motivation because we were supremely motivated ourselves. We did not come all this way to let something bad happen to this streak or this team, 4 years in. But what he did do is he provided us with, some intellectual help for, a bunch of high school kids who were maybe a little more confident than they should have been to keep us hungry, to keep us focused, and to make sure that we didn't get complacent. There was times where we could have easily gone into practice and just screwed around because we were pretty good at basketball. And certainly, if we were going to go play, one of our Class D opponents on a Tuesday night, there wasn't much doubt who was going to win the game. But he found a way to keep us focused and make sure that if we're going to be 2 hours in the gym practicing against each other, we were going to get something out of it. Not because the game on Tuesday night was in doubt, but maybe because a game in March was going to be in doubt. And, we were able to buy into that and, kind of able to pull that out. So I don't think there was a ton of pressure on us. But I do think that we kind of embraced the challenge and we were more interested in making sure that, we were doing everything that we could possibly do to make sure that there were no hiccups.
I got a random question for you, and you can see it in the background. There's a picture of you with a headband. When did you start rocking the headband? And second part of that, the pictures I've seen, the headband is upside down. Is that something you did purposely? Did you wear your headband upside down every game? And what's the reasoning behind that?
So the first part of your question is I started wearing the headband as a sophomore in high school. And not sure why. I think a guy on our team, Gavin Robinson, was wearing a headband, and it became something that we did a little bit together. And with the shaved head, it was kind of a unique look, and it just seemed like something that I would go with. At that point in my life, and maybe now, I'm very, very much against the grain. I want to be unique. I want to be different, and that was a way to be a little bit different, and which is why the headband came in upside down. And I think part of that was I think I experimented with it because there was a rule, the Maine Principals Association, or maybe it was the referee organization or what have you. There was a rule about logos, and I don't know if it was the size of the logo or you couldn't, you essentially couldn't promote anybody's logo or anything like that. So there was times when the officials would tell us to turn our headband or armbands inside out so you couldn't see the Nike swoosh. So I think at one point I switched, I flipped it upside down to be like, it's not a Nike, like this is no company. This is nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that mattered, but in my mind, I think that's what I was attempting to do. And it just became a thing for me. So, the headband stayed with me right up until the end of college. So it stuck.
If you had to go play in an alumni game or something like that, would you rock the headband still, or is that a thing of the past now?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it was not a bad look for skinny Nick.
Yeah.
It's probably not a great look for little heavy set thick Nick. So, my headband days are certainly over. But at the time, I felt pretty good about it.
So you wrapped up your high school career 84-0 for the straight state championship, and along with the state championships comes the unique opportunity to get interviewed by Maine PBS after the game. And I'm guessing you got a lot of practice of being on TV, right? So who interviewed you guys? What's his name? Is it TJ Maines or something like that? Or he might have been the Bangor guy, but
in Augusta, it was a gentleman named Bim Gibson.
Oh, yes.
Which Bim was great. And, after I got out of college and kind of came back to the area a little bit, I was blessed with the opportunity to join those guys and be the color commentary for some of the Maine high school basketball action. Dave Cheever was the play-by-play guy. I was doing the color commentary, and Bim was always the sideline reporter. So Bim was our guy in Augusta. In Bangor, I don't think, because we were Thursday night, it was a late game. They were trying to you got to remember the state championship games. They were also they were fundraising for Maine PBS, Maine Public Broadcasting. So they had to get all their fundraising ads into the broadcast, whether it be halftime or after the game or whatever. So I don't believe that my sophomore year we spoke to anybody in terms of the TV coverage. I think a couple of us spoke to maybe some newspaper or radio guys. But my senior year, it was I believe it was Ernie Clark who came over and did an interview for us. All fun times. Again, we were in Bingham, Maine. There wasn't those kind of opportunities for us to be covered like that. Yeah. It eventually kind of became a custom for us. We were in the newspaper a lot and in the Morning Sentinel a lot. There was quite a bit of coverage and interest there, but always fun being on TV. And certainly my accent is a little thicker in those interviews than I never thought it was. So.
Yeah. Also, you got to go out senior year, Bangor Daily News All-State First Team, and I'm guessing for a small kid or a kid from small town Maine, like there had to be like some extra vindication, like yes, like I may be from a Class D school, but I belong here. Like I am one of the best, and like had to have been like some sort of vindication for yourself, I'm guessing.
That Bangor Daily News All-State team was, I think that was like the top of the heap. When you got in that article, that first team was always accompanied by pictures, so everybody's state, we submitted, whether it was senior photos or whatever it was, but those, that article when it came out was a big deal. That first team had five, face shots of the guys that were going to be, on that team. And, that was really the bar for where you're at and how high you had ascended in the ranks of Maine high school basketball. I don't have the statistics to support it. But I can't imagine there was a whole lot of Class D representation on that first team. I believe Chris.
You were the only one. Your team was stacked. You, Jamal, Nick Medley. Who else? I just had it pulled up. Brian Wall.
Brian Wall, yeah.
Yeah. And Joe Campbell.
Yeah, that was certainly a stacked team, but I'm thinking more like historically, like how many Class D players had actually got on that first team. I'm sure there was a few, but to be one of the only Class D guys to get up there and to get to that level, certainly a humbling accomplishment. To be up there versus guy, Jamal won Mr. Basketball. Joe, state championship, second in the voting to Mr. Basketball. Brian Wool, got a scholarship to go play Division II basketball. And obviously Nick Cantor-Medley got a big-time scholarship to go play in the ACC. So to be mentioned with those guys coming from a small town in Bingham and being, 5'10" and 140 pounds, that was, that was something that, as I started as a freshman, was probably not in my sights and not something that was expected to be, attainable. But, we got there, and thank God I had great teammates and that helped me along the way. Somebody's got to be scoring all those points, when you're throwing passes and passing you the ball and playing defense and all that stuff. So, humble experience to, humble the accomplishment to be on there. And I was just really blessed to be a part of a really unique and great basketball situation with great teammates, great community support, great support from all of our parents and our teachers and our, the other students in the district. It was really a unique thing. And you throw all those things together on top of our hard work and our work ethic. And that's why that situation happened. And that's why there's a story to tell about Valley basketball.
Yeah. So your transformation from 4'11" freshman year, Nick, to graduating as a 4-time state champ, going out as an all-state first-team performer, that's quite the transformation. And the transformation was significant enough you got to go play in college. You went to Plymouth State. So what was the process like deciding where to go? How'd you wind up at Plymouth State?
Interesting question. It's a question I've had to answer a number of times because it's a unique story. The main goal my senior year was just to win a state championship and close that thing out and make sure nothing bad happened to the streak and to our standing in Maine high school basketball. And that was my main focus. Obviously, I was put in a lot of time to that. Also, being the son of an educator and being instilled with certain values, my academics were also very important to me. So focusing on that, I really didn't know how the college process was going to work. My father had gone to college, but things were different now than that. My brother had gone on to USM, previously, but I was left with not really a roadmap on, okay, this is what you need to do. And this is the schools you need to scope out. Part of that was my own issues because I was so obsessed with basketball that nothing else really mattered. But the other part of that was I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't really know, how to figure that out. So the season ended and I'm like, okay, I guess the next step is to figure out where I'm going to go to college. I knew I wanted to play college basketball. It certainly would have helped to have a coach call me up and say, hey, Nick, we really like what I see from you. I think you can play college basketball for our team. We'd love to have you visit campus. That phone call never came. So there was no –
Not even from Maine schools?
A couple Maine schools checked in with me, but nobody said, come visit our campus and you're good and you can be on our team. They called me up and said, hey, what are you thinking about? Have you thought about our school? No, I haven't thought about any school. I don't know. And that's really as far as, the conversation went. And I didn't really want to stay in Maine. That was kind of the one thing that I knew. You grow up in Bingham, Maine, it was a certain experience, but there was a part of me that's like, okay, I think leaving would help, my maturity level and getting out there on my own and things of that nature. I was a spoiled kid. My parents did everything for me. When I came home from practice, food was there and ready to go. And if I needed to get somewhere, my parents were bringing me wherever I wanted to go. So there was a desire for me to venture out into the world by myself and see if I could actually hold up. But so USM checked in, Maine Maritime checked in, Dick Meter at UMF had checked in. But again, those conversations were never really they didn't really progress. Maine Maritime was not a college atmosphere that I was interested in. Had I been more familiar with their school and the value of their degree, I probably would have considered it a little bit more, because I know a lot of Maine Maritime grads are doing very well in their adult professional lives. But Danny Costigan checked in from USM, and my brother had gone to USM, and he lived off campus, and he lived in Portland. So I had this envision of the school that, like, there was a campus over here, but kids lived other places, and it didn't seem like the college atmosphere that I was interested in. I wanted to go to a school, a more traditional, school with dorms, and people were right there, and that's where the interaction happened. So I was upfront with Danny, and I think Danny probably said more than any other coach in terms of how he felt about me as a player. I think he may have shared with me that he thought I was good. I don't know that he thought I was going to be what I ended up becoming, but I had a friend at the time that was currently at Plymouth State, and my father had kind of quasi gone to Plymouth State for a couple hours to play college football before he decided that he should return home to my mother and my brother. But so Plymouth State was always kind of, I didn't know much about the school. I knew I had a friend that was going there, and I knew that my father was interested in it at one point. Also had a family friend that was a graduate of Plymouth State, so I was able to kind of, and his name was Kevin Withy, and he had a great experience at Plymouth State playing football. So Plymouth State kind of seemed to keep coming up for me. Did some research on the basketball team, solid basketball team, always in the mix in the Little East Conference, and started looking at their roster complexion, and it felt like something that could work for me. It felt like something that I could, again, I'd have to start from the bottom and move my way up, and my expectations would have to start over again, right? You'd have to start with some freshman goals and some sophomore goals and keep building your way up. But I felt good enough about my game that I felt like I could go there, and I could at least start that process and to see where I could get to. So I sent an email off to the coach, and I tried to pick out some of the best game film that I had, and I tried to share with him my story. And, Coach Scheineman, I love him to death. I have a great relationship with him. Had a great 4 years at Plymouth State, some of the best times of my life. But he sent me back an email and basically said he wasn't interested, that he had a roster cap, and that he didn't really see an avenue to me being on the basketball team. I was blown away, but there was never a moment where I said to myself, okay, Plymouth State's out. For whatever reason, I didn't really accept his assessment of whether or not I could play basketball there. And you would think that you would probably want the blessing of the head coach in regards to where you're going to go to school for the next 4 years. But to be honest with you, I was like, okay, it wasn't the first time somebody had told me that I wasn't good enough.
Right.
It had been said to me before, and I was comfortable getting that information. And okay, well, maybe I'll look at some other schools, but I'm still interested in Plymouth State. And then, Danny Costigan, I had told Danny that I was interested in Plymouth State, and they play in the same conference. Chris Willer was at St. Joe's and playing for Rick Simons. So Rick Simons had caught wind of my desire to go to Plymouth State. The connection there is Coach Scheineman had been Rick Simons' assistant coach at one point at St. Joe's. So they knew each other. So a couple people started calling Coach Scheineman on my behalf. I didn't ask them to. I didn't beg for somebody to call Coach Scheineman and tell him to take me. But somebody thought highly of me enough that they were going to try to help me out. And I'll be forever grateful for those guys of making those phone calls. And at some point, an email came in and said, we'd love to have you here at Plymouth State, and you can be on the basketball team, which was, again, just kind of information that really didn't move me emotionally, because I was assuming that I was going to be on the basketball team anyways, because I felt good about my game. But that's really how Plymouth State happened. And it's an interesting story. And, people are blown away when I tell them that I wasn't recruited and nobody was interested in me. And, that's not really a big deal to me. And it's a part of my story, I guess, but it's not, I'm not sure as it's a significant part of my story as others would want to make it.
Also part of your story is the fact that you went on to be one of the leading scorers in the entire country and go out as an All-American. So how do you go from not being recruited, kind of going to school and not guaranteeing that you're going to be in the basketball team, and then going out as, I think, you were the third leading scorer in the country or something like that, averaged 27 a game, and were named an All-American. Like, how do you go from that point to the end point?
I think a lot of that is based on the work ethic and the passion and the desire and the, fear of losing and fear of not being good enough. I mean, all of those things were instilled in us from a very young age where I come from. Again, I can point back to the countless hours that we spent on the playground just, doing everything that we could to make sure that we could go home that night and tell, my big brother or my parents that, I won a 2-on-2 basketball game. And so that's really where all that starts. Because if you didn't have that inside you, you wouldn't have gone to Plymouth State when the coach said that he didn't have a spot for you. You would have found somewhere else to go, or you would have chosen an easier path, or whatever that is. So how do you get from somebody who got that email from Coach Scheineman to somebody who becomes an All-American? It's all those things. It's really what I would stack up versus anybody else is not my ability to shoot a basketball, not my ability to dribble a basketball. It'd be my ability to do whatever is absolutely necessary to make sure that I don't lose. And that could be as hard as you practice, the time you put in outside of practice, your social interests or whatever it is. There's a long list of things that certainly can affect the ultimate decision on game day that you have to incorporate in your life. And one of the things that I'll always be, the most proud of, and it's not my opinion, but it's the opinion of my teammates. It's the opinion of my coaches. I've heard them say it numerous times, whether it's at team banquets or, getting together for alumni functions or whatever it is. I've been told numerous times that there is nobody that in the 4 years that I was at Plymouth State that practiced harder than I did. And that seems like a very small thing, and it makes sense to me on the surface because I took practice very seriously. I did not take reps off. Everything was game speed. Everything was 100%. But it also it has a different tone when you hear somebody else, comment on it, because I didn't know that it was drastically different than what everybody else was doing. I was immersed in my own desires of how I wanted to approach practice and what I wanted to accomplish each and every one of those days. So I didn't realize that maybe my level of commitment at practice was at a level that not everybody else was at. So that's that's probably one of the biggest factors at how you get to that point. And also had some great teammates. Again, I had some great inspiration from some older guys in front of me, whether it's Jason Blackburn or Kenny Stewart or Danny Craig. And these were guys that I looked up to, Mike Laughlin, Anthony Oglesby, all these guys were ahead of me in grade. And, to watch them go about their business and see how they handled themselves, it really put me into a mindset, okay, this is what my responsibility is, and this is what I need to do. If you're part of a program that doesn't have those guys in it and they don't have that approach, maybe a guy like me doesn't get to the level that I got to. Certainly there's some things that I did individually to get there, but there's also some, there's a culture that's involved there. There's some values that are involved there. that help you along the way. And I also was a part of some really well-coached staffs. John Scheineman was a great coach for us, and we put out some teams that won a ton of games. And we, like many other D3 institutions, there was some turnover, and there was kind of a little coaching carousel with some of our assistants, because it's not it's not the most well-paying job, and it's it's quite the grind. But we were able to get around some guys that really sacrificed a lot for our basketball teams, and they didn't get a whole lot in return, other than I guess something similar that I'm getting right now is just the ability to scratch that itch of competition and to be able to stay in the game.
Yes, that's my next question for you, because we talk about all this competitiveness, being the competitor kind of drove you to be better and to be the best you could be. When did it end for you? Because we've actually crossed paths a couple times. I actually worked the Pine Tree Camp one year when you were there as a coach, so I got to saw the coaches scrimmage at night one night, and I just saw the competitiveness firsthand from you. I
apologize for any of my actions if they were not all that endearing.
Yeah, and then I think you ever play in the Noonan tournament?
I've played in that tournament a couple times. Been able to. I know Zach Ray allowed me to tag along with some of his teams from the Boston area a couple years. We won it. We won it once or twice. A few years back. But interesting question. I think I want to play basketball. I'm not much of an exerciser. I don't. Getting on a treadmill or going for a jog is just not something that, I'm competitive.
Yeah.
And, I think the only thing competitive about that would be to get some time involved and to figure out, if you can beat your next time. I don't know, for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to be, an accomplishment-oriented task. So I would love to play basketball. I would love to, for that to be part of my routine and to be a way for me to continue to get exercise. Here's really the problem with that. I tell my wife this all the time, and thankfully she was not around when I was a basketball player, because she may not be married to me, because I think part of, one of the reasons I was so successful as a basketball player, individually, is I think you need to be able to embrace some things about your emotions and about your actions that are maybe not the most attractive. I think that sometimes, being friendly is going to allow you to accomplish the thing that you don't want to accomplish, which is maybe losing. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think you can be a great guy and still win. That just wasn't my approach. So what happens is when I step on the basketball court, the competitive nature is supersedes all other goals, whether it be conditioning goals or just being out there as a hobby to try to make shots. I find myself falling into a mindset and an attitude that, in really my opinion, is not super attractive and not something that I want to put on display in public anymore, because my reputation's important. I want people to like me. I want people to think highly of me. And so, I don't know if that makes me sound like a terrible human being, but it's it's really tough for me to separate, my desire to win. And I don't want that to sound like I'm out there cheap shotting people or being physical or being dirty. That's not what that is. It's involving myself in conversations and in actions and in situations that are really, on the grand scheme of things, aren't that important, but I make them important because I think they're the difference between winning and losing. Hopefully one of these days I can find a happy medium, but I don't know. The other piece of the puzzle is I don't have any wood to knock on next to me, but I haven't had any major injuries. So I like to play golf.
Yeah. I
would hate to be out on the basketball court and tear up a knee or do something crazy and have to sacrifice some rounds of golf summer for that. So I do want to play. I wish I could play without, being a crazy person, but hopefully if I get to that point, hopefully I don't, come down with any injuries or anything like that. There is talks amongst a couple of my close friends, and I don't know if this ever reach out, this ever quite get out to the Boston area and get out to my guy, Zach Ray, but there is rumors that a couple of us who have played some men's league tournaments in the past or would like to find a way to kind of come out of retirement this spring and see what that looks like, if only for the ability to maybe spend a couple days together, reminiscing and talking about some of the memories. Hopefully we would not run into too much youthful talent and embarrass ourselves.
I want to get Zach Ray on, so I'll ask him that question when we get Zach on the podcast. We'll ask him.
Zach would be a great interview, man. He is he's one of my all time favorite people. Got to play against him in high school and then play against him in one game in college, and then became pretty good friends with him once we got out of college. He was gracious enough to get me involved in a charity basketball tournament in the Boston area that happened every March. That was almost like a tradition for us. I would go down to Boston and spend the weekend with him and Rob Stockwell, and we would play basketball and go out to dinner and have a great weekend. Again, my body is at a level where I can't compete with that involved in that anymore, but I do miss that opportunity. But Zach is one of the all-time great people. He'd be a great guy to talk to, and probably has some real stories to share with you as well.
Yeah. I got to make that happen. That's on the to-do list. It's on my bucket list right there to get Zach. So we'll ask him that question. You mentioned wanting to give back and still be part of the game. So right now you're an assistant at Kobe. If there was a dream job that opened up in Maine for you to go be the head coach, what's the dream job? What's the job that if offered to you, you'd be like, all right, I'm gonna let go of the golf management thing. I'm gonna go coach here. What would it be?
Well, I'll be open and honest with you. Can appreciate the hypothetical question, but I right now have my dream job.
Okay.
I've spent some time there in multiple roles. The head pro there, Don Roberts, allowed me to work in the pro shop when I was just getting out of college. I then was a member there for quite some time. I was able to work with the board of directors and now kind of got elevated into my role. So outside of basketball, golf is a real passion for me. I have much love for Waterville Country Club. So if you can imagine being very interested in the industry that you work in, and then couple that with how much you care about a place and the people that are at that place and spend time at that place, there really isn't a better place for me than the spot that I have right now, which I'm very grateful for and ecstatic about. But I'll play along, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't be interested in coaching high school basketball. And it's not probably for the same reasons why a lot of people would answer that question that way. I think there certainly are some challenges that go along with a position like that. But I myself am not a good teacher of basketball. And I learned that in my time at Waterville High School. And I feel bad about that, because had I been a better teacher of basketball, maybe we could have had a little bit more success at Waterville High School. I can do things on the basketball court based on how I was taught and based on being able to look at things and being able to replicate them. But I can't teach anybody. I struggle to teach somebody how to use a pivot foot. I'd struggle to teach somebody, what their shot form should look like and things like that. All important things, for a high school basketball program. So I probably wouldn't sign up for many high school jobs. But I guess if we're talking like on a collegiate level or maybe a professional level, like I wouldn't mind, being the head coach of the Maine Red Claws, to be that close to the NBA level. I know a couple guys in the NBA, and you had Josh Longstaff on, but one of my college teammates, Danny Craig, his name is starting to come up right now for some head coaching jobs. He's Eric Spoelstra's right-hand man. He's been down at Miami since 2003. He started out in the video room with Eric. Pat Riley was the head coach. Eric got elevated up based on his commitment, hard work. Danny took over Eric's job, running the video room, had a number of years with that. Now he's elevated himself to the first assistant on Eric's bench, and his name is coming up for head coaching jobs, and he will be a head coach in the NBA. So, selfishly, you said a job in Maine. So, I'll take the professional job where it could give me, the closest link to being at the highest level possible. If the Boston Celtics, or I'm a fan of the Charlotte Hornets. So if the Charlotte Hornets said we have an assistant coaching position for you right now, maybe Waterville Country Club would have to find a new general manager. But I don't see that in the cards. I think, I just turned 37. They're probably looking for somebody who's got a little more can bring a little more youthfulness to the table. So
you're good. You're good right now. You're good with where you're at right now.
Things are good, man. I'm a Maine resident at heart. I see myself being here forever. And like I said, golf is my second love, and I really care about the place and the people at Waterville Country Club. So it's right now in the Pelotte household, it's not difficult to wake up each and every day.
That's good. That's not a bad problem to have right there. Before we get up out of here, I always give my guests a chance to have the floor just to say whatever you want. If it's any breaking news you want to break, any rumors you want to clear up, anything at all. This is your chance to say your final piece before we get up out of here.
I'll just share with you, I appreciate having having me on, invite me on to talk about hoops. I was lucky enough to join Coach Bessie earlier this spring and come on his show, the In the Den podcast or video series. Really enjoyed it. I don't find myself in situations too often where I'm able to reminisce and to talk about some of the things in my past. I try not to do that because I'm not sure that anybody wants to hear it, and I'm always not sure that I want to talk about it. But when I get to chat with somebody who has some legit questions and wants to kind of dive into the details behind what happened in Bingham and in my career over the years, it's certainly it makes me feel like I went about things the right way, and I got something out of my work ethic and my effort. So if I was to share with anybody, listening or getting involved in what we did tonight is, just like with that email that I got, there's going to be people that knock you down and want to chip away at you and tell you you're not good at stuff. Just, what you believe and how you interpret things and what you want to accomplish is not going to be affected by whether or not somebody else thinks you can get there. I don't want that to sound like a cliche. It's happened, forever, whether or not it's somebody telling somebody they can't be class president or they're never going to, be able to date this girl or whatever it is. Just because people are gonna try to knock you down and tell you can't do something, that for me became fuel to try to prove them wrong. And if others can find their own version of that fuel, I think hopefully the outcomes will be pretty similar for them, and they'll be able to maybe in 20 years to be able to chat with you if you're still doing it or somebody else and share their story. But I do want to mention, is that a Michigan hoodie?
Yeah. I should have said something earlier when you said your wife was from Michigan.
Yeah, big-time Wolverine fans. That's actually, to be honest with you, one of the reasons why I think my wife gave me a chance is she was from Michigan, big Wolverine fan, and obviously I grew up in Bingham, Maine, which is not near Ann Arbor and doesn't have much allegiance to Ann Arbor. And I shared with her that I was also a Michigan fan, and I think there was some doubt on the sincerity of that comment. But I was able to share some information with her as it related to the football program and the Fab Five, and I think it went a long way in kind of taking me seriously. So we're huge Wolverines fans in this household, and getting excited that some college football is coming back in a couple weeks. We got
4 weeks, right? And they announced the date.
We got some college football to watch. So hopefully this is our year to get to the Big Ten championship game.
I hope so. It's time. That's for sure. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But it is coming soon. Real quick, I got one more quick question for you. Quick hitter before we get up out of here. Give me your 4 players from Valley you're taking with you to win a game here. You got to pick 4 teammates. You're going to be the point guard from your time. Who's rounding out the squad?
I'll start with Chris Willer. He was kind of the bar for us, and he was somebody that we all aspired to be, not only on the basketball court, but he was a great athlete, Class D athlete. He was a great baseball player, great soccer player, and obviously a great basketball player. So if you're gonna get into a bunker, he's a guy you want to get into a bunker with. I'm never going to leave Jason and Luke behind. That will never happen. I've spent so much time with those guys. We started out as baseball players. We were playing baseball in the backyard and, pretending to be all these different players. And that's really how we spent our time, in the backyard playing small yard baseball. And I don't know when the transition happened. I think probably after we started to be pretty good, and more of our summer activities surrounded around basketball. Baseball got kind of left behind. But I'm taking Chris, I'm taking Jason and Luke. I'll never leave them behind. And it's really, I played with some really good players at Valley, and I would like to take a bunch of them, but it's probably hard to leave Brian Andre, 6'10". You know what Brian does for the rest of us? It means that we can be a little bit more aggressive in the front court, trying to get steals, because if somebody dribbles by us or the ball gets passed over the top, I mean, he's protecting the rim. So he's a nice piece to have on the back end. So that's a pretty good 5 that we'll take.
Yeah, I think you could put that 5 up against pretty much anyone else's 5 right there. Feel good about your chances. Well,
probably not right now, but maybe 20 years ago we would have been okay, and we would have signed up for that. We would have tested ourselves versus anybody.
And you mentioned there's games out there. Are the games online? Can people see these games somewhere?
I don't think so. I'll share this with you. Because of everything that's happened with the coronavirus and the stay-at-home orders and things of that nature, early this spring, all these things are on VHS for us, which I know there's going to be some people watching this that won't know what a VHS is. But I was able to get my hands on a VCR, and I was able to find a way to hook up the VCR to some of these new age TVs, because there's not, the audio video cord is not what it used to be. So there's certainly some adapters that you need to have working some magic to get it to happen. But I was able to sit down, and I think my wife was not too excited to come home from work at times early on during the stay-at-home order, because we just sat there, and I shouldn't say we. I sat there and watched a bunch of old game tapes, and she just kind of had to come along for the ride. Her favorite parts were the post-game interviews with me and my significant and serious accent that was, pretty overwhelming and at some points. So I don't think any of the games are online. I've tried to investigate how to maybe transfer these things over from VHS, so maybe somebody else can, we could share them at some point. But we got a couple of these things, but I don't think anybody can go check them out. So
I think they can go find the SI article, though. I think if they Google it, you could probably still find the Sports Illustrated article out there for those that are interested. So.
Yeah, no, I think they could. If they Googled some stuff about us, I'm sure some things would come up. The Morning Sentinel and some of these other, the Bangor Daily News and some of these other local outlets, kudos to them. They made us feel like superstars, and they really covered us quite a bit. And, I'm sure there's a bunch of content out there.
Absolutely. Some legendary teams, and the leader of the pack, Nick Pelotte, on Big Time Hoops, the podcast. Shout out to Nick for coming through. This was a lot of fun, a lot of great stuff, and a lot of memories, like I said, for myself, just watching those games on Christmas or vacation break. Just PBS, got to watch these Valley games. So
yeah, no, I'm with you. I appreciate you having me on, and best of luck to you. I hope you keep getting guys on. Hope you can drag Zach on this bad boy. I'd love to watch and see what he has to say. That's
what I'm going to start working on. I got to go get him next. So once again, thank you to Nick Pelotte for coming on Big Time Hoops, the podcast. Check out all of our previous episodes everywhere you can get podcasts. It's out there. And we'll see you next week with another Big Time episode of Big Time Hoops. And it might be Zach Ray. Who knows? We'll find out next week, but we'll see you then.
Thanks again. Have a good night.